Okay, so regulations per the FAA remote pilot exam. We can see here this is the stats from the FAA up to 25% or maybe on regulations. And I think I've already mentioned this, may have mentioned this before in class, but um, they often will mix a question, right? They'll ask a question that requires you to go to the aeronautical charts, look at an airport, and then interpret the kind of airspace that you're operating in according to the regulations. So the question won't just pertain to flat out regulations. That'd be pretty easy, right? It's like a two-part question that requires you to have some knowledge about regulations and knowledge about operations or weather or the National Airspace System. Just keep that in mind as we go along. 14 CFR Part 107 applies to the commercial use of drones, right? We have the recreational pilot certificate, which we go under the rules of a community-based organization, which are pretty much the same as Part 107 in a way, but there is other additional things that they don't require or may require in addition to 107. 107 is specifically required a certificate under a remote pilot certificate under Part 107 is required for commercial operations. Just important. If you can just take pictures on your own just for fun, fine. But if you're going to use it, some kind of compensation or sale. So a question will come up like this: you're accepted football tickets in exchange for using your UAS to videotape a future construction site. Okay, in exchange, that's compensation, right? What FAA regulation is this operation subject to? Part 107. Right? Part 48, by the way, 14 CFR 48 is registration of aircraft. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But so here's definitions that are important to remember that will be tested on this. Small unmanned aircraft weigh less than 55 pounds, okay, including everything that's on board or otherwise attached to the aircraft. So if you attach something to an aircraft that weighs less than 55 pounds and it now weighs 55 pounds, it's no longer a small unmanned aircraft. Also, definitions: it's defined as an aircraft without the possibility of direct human intervention from within or on the aircraft. So you've seen videos where there's somebody sitting on sitting on a drone, and they call it a drone. It's not a drone. It's an electric airborne vehicle. But and there's lots of different terms for it. They mean the same thing: unmanned aircraft, uncrewed aircraft, UAS, UAS. All these terms may be found in the FAA knowledge exam. Okay, so UAS also includes not only the aircraft, but also the other communication links and the components that control it. Now, not all unmanned aircraft are subject to Part 107, right? It does not apply to model aircraft. That's unmanned, right? Model aircraft, amateur rockets, moored balloons, unmanned free balloons, kites, operations outside the United States. That's obvious. Important. Public aircraft operations. That's an important thing to note. Um, the public is um, government. Let's put it that way. That might be the easiest way to know. It's government, police, fire departments, military, right? Where uh, and air carrier, obviously airlines, different category. Not subject to 107. We are called civil operators, civil operations. Okay. Okay. All we got to do is figure out. Continuing with definitions: remote pilot command, person who holds the remote pilot certificate with a UAS rating. So you'll have a certificate that says um, um, remote pilot, but then there'll be a rating on there that specifies small unmanned aircraft. That's your rating. So you're limited to only aircraft less than 55 pounds. But that's the definition. A visual observer is a person acting as a flight crew member who assists the pilot. and or the person manipulating the controls to see and avoid other air traffic or objects in the air or on the ground. Person manipulating the controls, person controlling it under the supervision of the remote PIC. Right. So the example is you're trying to frame your video. You got a music video going on, and you're trying to frame everything and get everybody organized. Well, you probably need somebody to be flying the airplane if you're going to be trying to talk to people and sort of organize what's happening. So if you're standing close enough to you can. It's a operation for money, so you're getting paid. Somebody has to be in charge. You're the pilot in command. As long as you're close enough that you can stop the person manipulating control from doing something illegal or unsafe. By the way, remote pilot certificate holders with a UAS rating small UAS rating must meet the recurrent training requirements every 24 months. It's an online course, not a big deal. Or you can retake the test, but I doubt anybody's going to want to pay the $175 to take the test again, but it can be accomplished that way. Okay, so what are your privileges? Directly responsible for and is the final authority to the operation of that aircraft conducted under Part 107. They must be designated before each flight. You can change during the flight to another pilot in command, but somebody's got to be in charge. Ensure you are responsible for ensuring that the aircraft poses no undue hazard to people, aircraft, property in the event of a loss of control or for any reason. Must operate the aircraft to ensure compliance with all provisions and regulations. Okay. Other responsibilities, you self-evaluate yourself medically. You are in charge, as a pilot in command, you are in charge of the physical, to make sure that if your physical or mental capabilities are compromised, that you stop flying the aircraft. But also all of the crew members. If you're letting somebody else fly the aircraft, if they apparently if they're unable to physically fly it, or if they have some kind of and when we say medical capabilities, we're talking if they're taking some kind of anti migraine headache medicine, which causes blurred vision or something like that. Obviously, the pilot command is the one to make sure that no crew members are compromised, physically or mentally. Anyway, uh, other little items here that we want to recall is that no person may operate the aircraft more than one aircraft at the same time. You, as a remote pilot in command, if you have a person manipulating controls, you have to be directly supervised. They have to be directly supervised by a qualified remote pilot command. Um, you're responsible for the safety of flight. So, are there enough crew members? Any flight, whether it's autonomous or anything, you always must maintain VLOS. What's VLOS? Visual line of sight at all times. In order to maintain visual line of sight, you may not use binoculars only. You can use binoculars just as you see something out there and you're thinking, well, that might be an airplane. Oh, it might be a bird. We'll use binoculars briefly to look at the object, but you can't use binoculars or any other aid except eyeglasses to maintain visual sight of the aircraft. It must be always maintain visual sight, and you'll see questions about that later. Again, the bottom one, PIC is directly responsible for making sure the operation does not involve hazards to persons or property. Visual observer, just a quick little note about that. They must be in a position where they're able to see the UAS sufficiently to maintain visual line of sight. So this is a situation where you can't see it, like on the other side of the building or the other side of the trees. You must have a visual observer over there that somebody's got that aircraft in sight, and they have to be able to communicate with it. So you're flying the airplane, you can't see the aircraft anymore, but the visual observer can see it. Well, he or she needs to be able to communicate to you with the radio or something, or cell phone or whatever, to tell you, oh, I've got it in sight. There's a bird over there, or there's an airplane coming. You gotta get down low, whatever. Okay. Right. Part 107.5. Just a little quick little note here, just as a pause for a section. The regulations are in plain language. So you just do a Google search for 14 CFR Part 107 and you just read through it. It's in plain language. Pilots are not known to be some of them are, but most of them are not lawyers. Not legal language. It's just really clear, I think, anyway, to the um, so going to social media to ask the question, is this legal? Is like not, that just indicates that you're either very lazy or not very intelligent because the regulations are right there. Just be careful when you want to go to the government site. So 14 CFR Part 107, if you Google that, there'll be a lawyerly site. Well, they want to charge money. Don't do that. This is an FAA site. It's totally free. 107 is pretty important regulation. So anyway, right off the bat, it says no person may make or cause to be made fraudulent, intentional, false report or report that required to be made, kept, etc., etc., or reproduction or alteration for fraudulent purpose of any certificate. Right? You're not allowed to do that. Accident reported. You have to report an accident within 10 days to the FAA if 1. Serious injury to the person or any loss of consciousness. 2. Damage to property other than the UAS if the cost is greater than $500 to repair it or replace the property, whichever is lower. When they say serious injury to the person, we're not talking about bruises. We're not talking about even a small cut. If it requires stitches, that's pretty serious, yeah. Or if you have to go to the hospital, that's pretty serious. If you have to call the ambulance, that's pretty serious. So you have to report that within 10 days to the FAA. There are other things, just so you know, the NTSB, but that we're talking about big, we're talking about $30,000, major accidents to be reported to the national NTSB. But just keep that in mind. If you become a professional drone pilot, just be aware you can look that up on your own, but that's not on the test. So, okay, what FAA inspections and ramp checks? You got to show your pilot certificate. You got to show the aircraft registration document. If you have a waiver or exemption, then that has to be presented. In other words, if you want to have a waiver to go faster than 100 miles an hour, or even a waiver to go beyond line of sight, and the FAA comes and asks you about it. But it's not just the FAA. Any law enforcement officer can ask for these things as well. Registration must be registered if it weighs over 0.55 pounds, 249 grams. It must be registered by a person who is at least 13 years old, and you need to mark the registration on some external surface of the aircraft. All aircraft, even if it's less than 0.55 pounds, if it's used for Part 107, in other words, commercial operations, they must be registered. But the rule is anything less than 0.55 pounds don't need to register if it's used for recreational purposes, but if you're going to use it for money, it's got to be registered. I'm talking fast, I know. Foreign aircraft permit is required if it's owned, controlled, or operated by someone who's not a U.S. citizen. I don't believe there's many questions on that. Okay, so we have a registration question here. You're operating a 1,280 gram or 2.8 pound quadcopter for your own enjoyment. So from the previous slide, anything over 0.55 pounds needs to be registered, right? So, but if it's for your own enjoyment, it's not Part 107. That's not right. And to say that it has no regulations, that's not right. So by the process of elimination, we know that it's probably B. Why is it B? Because CFR 48 is all about registration. Anything over 0.55 pounds needs to be registered up here. So, okay. Okay, pre-flight actions and inspections. Remote Pilot Command is responsible for obtaining all available information prior to any operation to ensure that no hazard to person or property may occur. This involves a number of things according to the regulations. You've got to assess the weather, airspace, flight restrictions, location of person or property on the ground, or any other ground hazards, right? So we got to make sure that everything's cool in the area. Um, Inspect all components for proper condition and operation, right? This is a pre-flight inspection, basically, just like an aircraft, just like the airlines, just like everybody that flies an airplane. You got to make sure there's no parts that are going to fall off while you're flying and hurt somebody. Okay, then inform crew members about the operation, what is going to happen and who does what, right? I'm in charge. You're going to be looking for, we're in an area near an airport, so you're looking for other manned aircraft flying around because we're not allowed to interfere with manned aircraft, right? We got to stay away from manned aircraft. We got to give way to them. Okay. Other items, lithium batteries are installed for power are not considered hazmat. However, we're not allowed to carry any hazmat, and lithium batteries are hazmat. So if we're carrying a spare battery, that's hazmat. We're not allowed to carry any hazmat, right? But obviously, if it's used for the power, right? What is gasoline? What is jet fuel? It's hazmat, but it's used for flying, for the power source for an airplane, so you can use that. It's sort of an obvious question, I guess, but operation at night, we're skimming through this stuff pretty fast, otherwise we'll have a 4-hour video here. Operation at night, that's 107.29. No person may operate an aircraft at night unless it has well, first off, you have to take the initial written test. So if you've got your recreational pilot certificate already, you've passed the test. You can fly at night. Once you pass the Part 107 remote pilot exam, then you'll have passed the test. 2, unmanned aircraft must be equipped or have attached to it an anti-collision lighting visible for 3 statute miles that has a flash rate sufficient to avoid a collision. You can't just have a solid light. And it's got to be bright enough, so it's probably not the lights that are already on the drone. They're pretty dim, arguably, but they don't normally flash. Anyway, this is important because there's questions about this. The remote pilot command may reduce the intensity but may not extinguish the anti-collision lighting if they determine that because of the operating conditions it would be in the interest of safety not to have it fully bright, right? Remember, you need about 30 minutes of darkness for your eyes to adjust to your night vision, optimal night vision. So having really, really bright flashing lights right in front of you is going to destroy your night vision. By the way, sometimes there's questions about civil twilight. Civil twilight just is that period where it's not dark and it's not light, right? It begins 30 minutes before official sunrise and 30 minutes after the sun goes down. During that period of semi-light, these same kind of anti-collision lights need to be used. So just because, and you see people driving cars sometimes in the late afternoon, the sun's down, but there's not they forget to turn their lights on. Well, that's not a good idea. Same thing. VLOS, again to review, VLOS, the UAV, your aircraft must remain within visual line of sight. VLOS means that any crew member, remote person, remote pilot command, person manipulating controls, visual observer if used, they must be capable of seeing the aircraft with vision unaided by any device other than corrective lenses, right, or contact lenses. The visual aids or binoculars may be used only momentarily to enhance your situational awareness, but you've got to actually see it. Um, Even though you may briefly lose sight of it, and it happens sometimes. Well, you can't stare at if you just stare at the UAV up there, you're not really scanning the sky. So you need to be scanning the sky, little sectors of the sky every 10 seconds to go, move your eyes back and forth. So you can't keep the area in sight, especially if you're alone. But as soon as you can, you need to focus back to the aircraft because you're responsible for seeing and avoiding other aircraft, other drones, but also other manned aircraft. Other really basic things you need to memorize. You can't be flown faster than 87 knots or 100 miles an hour. They're both the same thing. 87 knots is 100 miles an hour, but you need to know both. There's questions that ask you how fast can you go, and then one of the answers will be 87 knots. Well, that's the correct answer. Or 100 miles an hour. Can't go any higher than 400 feet above ground level unless flown within 400-foot radius of a structure and then you can only fly 400 feet above that structure. So the diagram is pretty accurate. Got to have 3-mile visibility. Got to be 500 feet below a cloud and 2,000 feet away from it in any cloud. You cannot fly above clouds. Can't fly in clouds because you got to have 3-mile visibility. There's a reasoning for that, but this is not about that. We're trying to pass the test here. Right-of-way rules, we must give way to all manned aircraft. Specifically, in addition to that, when you're near an airport and there is traffic patterns, and we must give way, we must not cause any manned aircraft to have it to deviate from their normal traffic patterns. Includes airports, heliports, seaplane bases. Yield right to all aircraft, manned, unmanned. Avoid other potential hazards that may affect the remote pilot's operation. What this is called see and avoid. We just look at each other and stay away from each other. Operate over people. You may not operate a small unmanned aircraft over another person unless that person is directly involved. In other words, they're a visual observer, VO is visual observer, or a crew member. Or if they're under a safe cover, like if they're inside a stationary vehicle or a protective structure that would protect the person from harm if the aircraft were to hit and fall into the ground. Yeah, that's okay too. But otherwise, we can't fly over people. It's prohibited. There are some exceptions that we will learn, but right now you can't fly over people. These are the exceptions. Under certain restrictions, flights over people may be allowed. So we got one of these operational categories. Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, and Category 4. So briefly, for the purpose of the test, Category 1, you do this yourself. You buy an aircraft and you weigh it, and it says, oh, it's less than 0.55 pounds. You install propeller guards. It still weighs less than 0.55 pounds. And since all aircraft now, if you have an old aircraft, you might have to worry about this, but if it's a fairly new aircraft, it's already got a remote ID module, or it already has remote ID, then you can fly under certain conditions. You can fly over people. Category 2 and 3, the manufacturer provides the FAA with a declaration of compliance, a DOC, that explains to the FAA how this aircraft can be specifically operated in some circumstances over people. Not necessarily carte blanche, but in some circumstances it can be flown over people. They must have a declaration of compliance. It must be the aircraft, Category 2 and 3 aircraft must be labeled as Category 2 or Category 3. So on the thing it'll say Category 2 drone or Category 3 drone. Category 4 drone requires an airworthiness certificate, just like all all aircraft, period. All manned aircraft is what I'm trying to say. Just like you have an airworthiness certificate, which will provide safety features that then there's no restriction to fly over people. Quiz. So Category 1, operation over a moving vehicle with a human being inside. Okay, because of suboperation, and this I did not mention this, but under pretty much Category 1, 2, and 3, you can't fly over moving vehicles unless under certain circumstances. But the first circumstance is you cannot fly over the vehicle. Human being inside, the vehicle's moving, you can't fly over them. Operation from inside of a moving vehicle. You may operate a drone from inside a vehicle if it's a land vehicle or a waterborne vehicle, a boat, basically, and if you're under a sparsely populated area. You can't fly a drone from inside another aircraft. Also, if you're in a vehicle, boat, car, truck, whatever, you can't transport another person's property for compensation or hire. Okay, take a little break and read the slides, not on the test.